In 1947, Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins, a broker in Maine, is sentenced for killing his better half and her darling, a golf star. Since the territory of Maine has no capital punishment, he is given 2 successive life sentences and shipped off to the famously unforgiving Shawshank Jail. Andy continues to guarantee his guiltlessness, however his cold and ascertaining attitude persuades everybody to think he made it happen. In the meantime, Ellis Boyd Redding, Morgan Freeman, known as Red, is being consulted for parole subsequent to having burned through 20 years at Shawshank for homicide. Notwithstanding his earnest attempts and conduct, Red's parole is dismissed, which doesn't stage him so much. Red is then presented as the nearby dealer who can get detainees anything they need, sensibly speaking. A caution goes off alarming all detainees of fresh debuts. Red and his companions bet on whichever new fish will have an anxious separate during his most memorable night in jail. Red puts down an immense bet on Andy. During the primary evening, an overweight showed-up prisoner nicknamed Fat Ass separates and cries madly, permitting Haywood, William Sadler, to win the bet. Be that as it may, the festival is brief when the Maine watchman, Byron Hadley, Clancy Brown, viciously pounds the chunky individual for not keeping calm when asked to. In the interim, Andy stays resolute and created. The following morning, the detainees discover that Fat Ass passed on in the clinic on the grounds that the jail specialist had been out for the evening. Andy asks about the man's name just to get put somewhere near Haywood. About a month after the fact, Andy approaches Red, having known about his gifts for tracking down things. He requests that Red find him a stone sled, an instrument he guarantees is essential for his side interest of rock gathering and chiseling. Red poses a couple of inquiries about his goals, which Andy ignores. Red consents to put in the request and furthermore cautions Andy about the Sisters, a gathering of detainees who physically attacks different detainees, in particular their chief, Boggs, Imprint Ralston, who has eyes for Andy. However, different detainees think about Andy a truly unfeeling person. Red sees something in Andy, and preferences him all along. Red thinks Andy plans to utilize the mallet to design a break from now on, yet when he at long last sees the instrument's genuine size, he comprehends the reason why Andy chuckled and snickers as well, setting aside the possibility that Andy might at any point utilize it to get out from underneath jail. During the initial 2 years of his detainment, Andy invests the majority of his energy working in the jail clothing or fending off Boggs and the Sisters. However, he tirelessly opposes and battles them without fail. Andy is beaten and assaulted consistently, yet stays silent about it. At the point when a work detail for tarring the top of one of the jail structures is declared, Red makes some things happen to get Andy and a couple of their familiar companions relegated to the gig, offering everybody a reprieve from the standard thing. During the gig, Andy hears Hadley griping about paying assessments for an impending legacy. Drawing from his mastery as an investor, Andy tells Hadley how he can protect his cash from the IRS by transforming it into a one-time gift for his significant other. He then, at that point, offers to help Hadley finish the administrative work in return for a few cold brews for his kindred detainees while in the tarring position. Hadley first takes steps to lose Andy on the rooftop, yet at last, concurs and do furnish the functioning prisoners with cold lagers before the gig is done. Red comments that Andy might have designed the honor to construct favor with the jail watch as much similarly as with his kindred prisoners. However, he likewise figures Andy did it essentially to feel typical once more. While watching a film, Andy approaches Red with another strange interest and requests the entertainer Rita Hayworth. Red is astounded by the interest, however consents to put in the request. Yet again, as he leaves the theater, Andy experiences the Sisters. Despite the fact that he can convince his direction not to be assaulted, he is mercilessly whipped to a pulp, placing him in the clinic for a month. Boggs spends 7 days alone for the beating. At the point when he emerges, he finds Hadley and his men holding up in his cell. They beat him so seriously that he's left incapable to walk or eat strong nourishment until the end of his life and is moved to a jail clinic upstate. The Sisters continue on and at no point ever trouble Andy in the future. At the point when Andy escapes the hospital, he tracks down a lot of rocks for him to shape and a monster banner of Rita Hayworth in his cell, presented by Red and his companions. Superintendent Samuel Norton, Bounce Gunton, catches wind of how Andy helped Hadley and utilizes an unexpected cell examination to evaluate Andy. He finds Andy perusing his duplicate of the sacred book of scriptures, and they discuss their number one refrains, while the watchmen are flipping around the cell searching for unlawful belongings. Happy with their experience, the superintendent leaves and nearly neglects to give Andy his book of scriptures back. He then, at that point, urges Andy to continue perusing the book of scriptures, saying that salvation lays inside. Andy is subsequently prompted that he will present work in the jail library with maturing detainee Creeks Hatland, James Whitmore. The justification behind his exchange is made clear when a jail monitor shows up asking Andy for monetary prompting. Andy sets up an improvised work area and starts working, giving monetary encouragement to most jail monitors and assisting them with their personal government forms. Andy additionally sees a chance to grow the jail library. He begins by asking the Maine State Senate for reserves. He composes letters consistently. His monetary help practice is valued to the point that even watches from different detainment facilities, when they visit between jail baseball matches, look for Andy's monetary skill. Indeed, even the superintendent himself has Andy setting up his government forms. Not long a short time later, Creek snaps and takes steps to kill Haywood to try not to be paroled. Andy can talk him down. At the point when his companions talk about Creek's conduct, Red feels for Streams having clearly become organized in the wake of expenditure of 50 years at Shawshank. He has become basically molded to be a detainee until the end of his life and can't adjust to the rest of the world. Reed comments, "These walls are amusing. First, you disdain them, then you become accustomed to them. Enough time elapses, you get so you rely upon them." Streams is paroled and go to reside in a shelter. He is likewise given a task at a general store which he detests. Tracking down it difficult to conform to life outside the jail, he in the long run ends it all, leaving the message, "Creeks was here," cut on a wooden shaft. Following 6 years of composing letters, Andy gets $200 from the state for the library, alongside an assortment of old books and phonograph records. However, the state senate thinks this will be sufficient to get Andy to stop his letter-composing effort. He is fearless and tries harder. At the point when the gifts of old books and records show up at the superintendent's office, Andy tracks down a duplicate of Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro among the records. He secures the watchman doled out to the superintendent's office in the restroom and plays the record over the jail's DAT framework. The whole jail is before long enthralled by the music. Red comments that the voices of these ladies caused everybody to feel free, if by some stroke of good luck briefly. Outside the workplace, Norton seems incensed at the demonstration of rebellion and orders Andy to switch to the private player. Andy answers by increasing the volume. The superintendent orders Hadley to break into the workplace and Andy is sent quickly to isolation for a very long time. At the point when he gets out, he lets his companions know that the stretch was the most straightforward time he could possibly do in the opening, since he enjoyed it with Mozart's Figaro latched onto his subconscious mind for solace. At the point when different detainees let him know how far-fetched that is, he discusses the power that trust can have in jail and that trust can support them. Red firmly contradicts Andy, guaranteeing that trust is something risky in a spot like Shawshank, and tells Andy he ought to become acclimated to living without it. Andy infers that this is precisely the exact thing Streams did, and Red leaves the table irate. Not long later, Red has another parole hearing and understands he's been in jail for 30 years at this point. He utilizes precisely the same words he utilized a decade sooner, just with no energy by any means. His parole is dismissed once more. Andy gives him a harmonica to recognize his 30 years, which Red answers by offering Andy a monster banner of Marilyn Monroe to honor his 10 years. Around 4 years after the Mozart episode, the state senate, at last, reaches the resolution that they will not dispose of Andy with simply one more check. So they permit him a spending plan of $500 every year to fabricate his library. Andy utilizes it carefully and manages book clubs and good causes to make the best jail library in the state and names it after Creeks. With the broadened library and more materials, Andy starts to tutor detainees who need to accept their secondary school recognitions so they can find a good line of work once they're out. In the meantime,